Hello, it is I, Andrine, your Jewish American Priestess, here for another Elul Hebrune reading. And today is less than 1 week until Rosh Hashanah, and I'm tired. I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I'm tired. I've committed to a lot of things this month, even though it is the month with the emptiest schedule officially. So I'm just going to do a brief reading in this evening, and we'll see what comes up. I'm going to cast these Hebrunes into this incantation bowl. I've got the Dalet, the Chet, the Hey, the Resh, the Pei, the Ein Sof, the Mem, and the Yud. I swear I just put these letters in the bag and you heard me rattling them up, and yet they're basically the same letters that came up for the previous reading. And I guess that's just what's up right now. So let's just take a look at them and see. Maybe they're in slightly different positions than before, and that gives them a slightly different meaning. Our central issue is the Dalet, and the Dalet is the gateway. It's a doorway or a gate, and it represents humility, humbleness. It references the 4 directions and the 4 elements because it is the number 4. And so it has to do with all things 4. So it has to do with north, south, east, and west. It has to do with earth, air, fire, and water. It has to do with winter, spring, summer, and fall. It has to do with the 4 letters of the divine name, the Yud He and the Vav He. And it has to do with the forces in physics as well, the gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. It has to do with the day Monday in time and the planet Mars in the celestial bodies and the binary foundations of wisdom and foolishness. And as we come into this last week of Elul, as we head into Rosh Hashanah, we have choices to make about what we're going to do with this last week. Are we going to be wise and return and turn toward wisdom? Or are we going to be foolish and squander the time that we have left in this year? That seems to be our central issue right now. What's come right before this is the letter Resh. And Resh is the letter that stands for the head. It is the letter that begins the word Rosh, as in Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Chodesh. And it has to do with the mind and beginnings. It has to do with the intellect also. And that bending to the less educated, taking time to try to teach maybe in a way that is understood by those who maybe are not as educated as the rest of us. It has to do with the beginning. It has to do with the day Thursday in time, the planet Mercury in the heavenly celestial bodies. Interestingly, right now, Mercury is in retrograde, which means that it's appearing to go backwards. And that will continue on through the 1st of October. And it has to do with the binary of seed and barrenness. So it's interesting because we've just come through an entire year of the Shemitah, where we were instructed on some level not to plant seeds, and yet we are allowed to reap anything that grows naturally in the world. I have here a sprig of sage that's just growing in my garden, and regardless of what I do to it, it continues to come. What have we planted spiritually, emotionally, and physically in the world recently, and has that borne fruit, or has our fallow fields resulted in barrenness? That's what's come right before this time of the gateway that we're passing through right now. And what's going to help us right now in this time, as we enter the gate, as we pass toward the gate, is the letter Chet. Chet is the number 8. It's the 8th letter. And so it represents infinity, the infinite. 8 on its side looks like an infinity symbol. It's also the letter that begins the word Chai, life. And we are instructed to choose life. This is this week's Torah portion, is the admonition to choose life. And that's what we're expected to do as we pass through this gate here, this Dalet. Consider the infinite and choose life when we have that choice presented to us. The Chet can also represent a chuppah. There's a lot of weddings going on right now. We've passed a posse of bridesmaids on the way home this afternoon. At least I assume that's what it was. 5 women in matching dresses. So there are a lot of weddings going on right now. And this chuppah is also about a covenant, or a contract at any rate. Perhaps a contract that we have with the divine, and whether we will make the appropriate choices in this coming season. Chet rules over the constellation of Cancer in the sky and the month of Tammuz, and the foundation of speech. So we have some speaking to do right now, perhaps in our teshuvah, when we're focusing right now on what kind of repair do we need to make in our lives, in our relationships. So as we're passing through this gate, one thing that may help us is choosing life and choosing to communicate effectively with our speech as we are making teshuvah and making amends to those who need repair in our life. And maybe having that divine contract with divinity, or with ourselves, and or with another person, or several people, with our community perhaps. And that's what's going to help us right now as we pass through this gate. And what might not help us right now is the hay. It's a little confusing for me, because hay is this concept of presence, and maybe it's not that it's not going to assist us right now, but sometimes when something's on the lower line, it's about a fear we might have. Maybe we're afraid that we won't be present. We won't be able to be present in a way that is meaningful But what we do know is that, presence, it's particularly divine presence, is a thing that does assist in almost every circumstance. So don't be afraid of what might be perceived as a lack of divine presence. Somebody pointed out today in one of my conversations that perhaps if we're not feeling as spiritually connected right now as we might, it's because we're saving up our reserves for this very intense spiritual time coming up next week with Rosh Hashanah and right into Yom Kippur. The He is about connection. It's about presence. It's about unity and expression and revelation. It is 2 of the 4 letters of the divine name, the Yud He and the Vav He. And so it has a lot to do with divinity and that concept of presence, the verb to be, to become, that is that name, that divine name. It's the number 5, and so it speaks to the 5 fingers on the hand and action that we might take in the world. It rules over the constellation Aries and the month of Nisan, which is the month in which the other new year happens, the first new year, the new year of the kings and the new year of the spring. So rather than focusing back on that new year, we're focusing forward on this coming new year next week. And again, not being afraid of the lack of presence, not being concerned that we aren't present enough or that the divinity isn't present with us as we go through this gate. But again, focusing on life. And as we pass through that gate, where we're moving toward is Pe. Pe is a mouth. It is the mouth of divinity. As creation is spoken into being. And again, about communication, about using one's words to create reality, the way that the divine used words and these letters to create all. Pe is also a spiral. You'll see it spirals in and it spirals out, as if it were giving us a path toward the infinite microcosm and the infinite macrocosm. It is the number 80, so it is the ultimate manifestation of the infinite, in the same way that Chet is the infinite. So we have both 8 and 80 in this reading, and we're moving toward this ultimate manifestation of the infinite here as we pass through that gate. And what will assist us when we pass through that gate is this blank rune, right? We've got this blank one that is the Ein Sof. It again speaks to infinity, that blankness, that emptiness, that, that blankness and that emptiness that out of which everything was created. So it's that template or the matter, the material out of which everything is created. And so, again, this infinite, this blank slate, we've got 8 infinity, 80 ultimate infinity, and then just the material out of which everything is created, which is infinite as well. So we're focusing a lot on infinity here, on the infinite. that which is possible, the potential. And what's on our lower line here is the letter Mem, and Mem is one of the mother letters. It's the mother letter that refers to water, the creation element of water. And in its own way, it's an infinity. It's that water in which we are gestated in the womb, when we're just floating, when there's nothing that we know except the water. Mem is the number 40 and represents the number of weeks of gestation in the human. It is that water of life. And it's on the lower line, which might indicate that it's something that won't help us here. But again, I think it's about fear. It's about the fear that what we've been gestating will not come to fruition. Because we've been in this blank space of Elul, contemplating and hopefully examining ourselves and germinating something, and there's a concern perhaps that we will not birth that which we are intended to birth. But we don't need to fear that, because we have the infinite and the ultimate infinite here above us. And if we have that fear about not being able to give birth to that which we've been gestating, we can just turn our minds up to the infinite and know that all things come from that primordial material, that all things come from that space of the infinite, that everything that is created came out of nothingness. So even though we've been gestating in a water of unknowing, we can trust that things will be spoken into creation, and that we will become one with all that is. And that leads us to the final letter in our reading, which is the Yud. And that makes sense, because the Yud is that one point, that one small point out of which all things were created. When the divine had to contract themselves down from this infinite nothingness into one point out of which all things then came. And the Yud is the number 10, and it is the letter that represents the month of Elul. It is 10 times 1, 1 being the idea of oneness, and so it is the ultimate manifestation of oneness, and it is the first letter of the divine name, that single point out of which all things exploded into creation. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. And so as we move forward through the gate into the beginning where the world was spoken, into creation, we move forward to the 10th gate, the 10th day of Yom Kippur. Yud stands for hand, yad, and action in the world, because this is the month where we use our hands to repair things that need repair, things that have been broken. We use our hand and we use our mouth. We use our communication tools to repair. And we give tzedakah. We use our hands to try to repair things that need repair. And Yud represents the month of Elul and the constellation Virgo in the sky, and because of that, it has to do with that idea of purity, and I wouldn't say innocence, but more potential, like the potential of flowering. It's like a seed itself, in the same way that Reish is like a seed, but it's like a seed or a sperm that out of which all a whole plant or human or orchard or an entire people can be born. It has that potential. And it also has to do with the foundation of sexuality, procreation, creation and procreation. So as we move into this last week of Elul, we have, again, the central gate through which we're walking. The gates are opening. The gates are open now. And we have the ability to walk through them, having just come out of this time of contemplation where we're looking at seeds and barrenness, and we can rely on the infinite here. Choose life that we may live. Don't be afraid of the lack of presence or what is perceived as lack of presence, but instead walk through that gate into the infinite. And that will bring us forward into this spiral of ultimate infinite. And what helps us there is that blank canvas, that primordial material out of which all things are created, the potential for all things to be created. And again, not to fear that we will not birth what we are gestating, but know that all things are spoken into existence, and we have the power of speech as well, on which to carve the future that is coming. And make space at this time. This last week, we're still making space so that we can contract down into that one point and explode force into the new year, birthed, fully formed as new beings. And that's our reading for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely contemplative week as you move forward through the last week of Elul into Rosh Hashanah. Shavua Tov.